and that we would now go into the recorded part of the meeting. Minutes. We've had the minutes of last month's meeting provided ahead of time. Does anyone have any input, any discussion on the minutes? Motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Sal, second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Minutes stand adopted. Now we move on to the community advisory panel updates. I'm happy to inform everyone that the board is working with the community advisory panel. We are meeting with, the board is actually having meeting with 2 or 3 representatives from the panel to a facilitated discussion that will bring out some of the next step that we are open, we hope we proceed from that discussion. And we are looking at several things. And this morning we just talked about our internal equity work. It is not an accident of history that in the last 4 years, when this country was facing one of the toughest challenges, when justice was facing one of the toughest challenges, we have more than 6 people of color on the board of ATJ. And those are some of the things that don't just happen. You know, myself, Sal, Miria, you know, Michelle, Lindy, SP, we are all people of color. This is the first time that the ATJ board, we have so many people of color on the board. Our fears is, you know, what happened next? Do we go back to the state, and this board has really put up so many programs that address race equity. And so we believe that working with the community advisory panel will help provide a long view of things, and that the ATJ board will be better situated to continue to focus on race equity and to continue to expand the field and fight for justice for everyone, including our brothers and sisters in the LGBT community, which is very, very important. We all went through this. So we're hoping that the community advisory panel meeting with the ATJ board will provide the next step, and hopefully we will report back next month about that. Thank you. Now we go to the Poverty Action Plan update. Cesar, Charge, Reedy, over to you.
Francis, I think I'm supposed to kick it off and pass it on to Chach and Cesar. So we wanted to discuss the Poverty Action Plan that has been drafted and now I think published by the governor's office. Initially, this came to the DISCO subcommittee as kind of a last minute, is there anything that we can do sort of situation. For the last 3 years, the governor's office had convened essentially a roundtable to develop a plan on how to reduce poverty in Washington state. And they had all these stakeholder meetings involving a lot of the communities that we serve, members from our the civil legal aid community also presented, I know from Columbia Legal Services and from Solid Ground, to their advisory panel. I think it's of almost 30 people. And with 3 years of information gathering, this past year has been spent on drafting a final plan. I think in November, some of us found out or got a copy of the draft plan, and civil legal aid was just not anywhere present in the plan at all. I think which reflects on the larger community's lack of understanding still of what civil legal aid does, and how we also need to be a solution in poverty reduction um, planning. So I think there was, the best way I can describe it is a bit of a panic trying to figure out how do we make sure before this gets published we can still provide some input. So there have been conversations about potentially the ATJ board providing a letter to the governor, us writing a response and presenting it to legislators separately. But we were actually able to get connected to essentially the author of the plan who was finalizing the draft. And so Chach, Cesar, and I met with, I think her name is Lori Finst. She's the senior director, I think, of I wrote it down somewhere, of their DSHS's economic service. And basically 10 days before it went to publish, we connected with her and wanted to kind of understand where there's still room to provide input and ensure that civil legal aid is not left out of the conversation. Um, I'm usually somebody who tries to keep it brief, so maybe I kept it too brief with the introduction. Chach, Cesar, is there anything related to that you want to add, or do you want to talk about the conversation we had with Lori?
I would just say that the item that you left out is just that it was you, and I really appreciate, and I think we all owe you a great deal of gratitude for bringing this forward at DISCO, and the fact that this process, which had been a multi-year process, that somehow we had just not really engaged in the way that would allow the role of civil legal aid and poverty reduction to be incorporated into the process. So thank you, Reedy, because you really got put the fire under us to get something going. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I will
Chach,
also, I'll also add that, Reedy really was a champion, and she got us the meeting, and Lori was very receptive, which I don't think we expected necessarily as she was finalizing the draft. And we talked to her, and she was able to add civil legal aid, and Reedy and Cesar did some drafting and got it in there. So that's how it went, and I think I'll bounce it back to Reedy to talk about specifically what we added.
So thank you, Chach. With the plan, it's a very, very broad plan. The idea is, thank you, Cesar, for sharing it. It's in the chat now. It's a very broad plan. It's 80 pages trying to tackle how Washington is going to take strategic steps in reducing poverty in the state. So they've identified essentially 8 strategy areas that the idea is that in the next next couple of years, it's meant to be a living, breathing document that more specific strategies are going to be developed under each of these sort of 8 broad categories. I don't remember all the different 8 categories. It's in the plan itself, but when Chach, Cesar, and I would just want to say, like Michael, who's on the call, Denise Diskin from Q Law, there were other folks who were also involved in this conversation. They just could not make the meeting time with Lori, and they're also interested in continuing participation in this continued planning related to the plan. But when we went back and looked at the plan, it looked like among the 8 categories, there were 3 areas where civil legal aid could have a very direct impact. So strategy 2 really focused on equal space, creating more equal space and power for low-income communities and communities of color. Strategy 5 looked at addressing urgent emergency needs for our communities, and strategy 7 focused on decriminalizing and essentially reducing communities' reliance on the child welfare system and the justice system. So these were 3 areas where we thought we could provide some input and recommendations, sort of broad recommendations that were directly related to civil legal aid. I'll just, one thing related to the meeting with Lori, I also just want to highlight that as attorneys, I think as attorneys and people within the legal system, I think a lot of times we approach these conversations in a more adversarial way. And with Lori, we really approached the conversation as, please tell us how this was developed. And I think that also really helped in her being open to the recommendations that we really inserted at the very last minute. Like, this was due December 31st and we sent these to her on December 30th. So Cesar, since you posted this, do you want to talk specifically about the recommendations?
Actually, I wanted to, the plan, as you say, is 80 pages long or so. I've shared the link. I guess I could share the, there are 8 overall overriding strategies, and as Rudy indicated, strategy 2 concerned balance of power and resources. And one of the recommendations we made was recommendation 2D, which is now in the body of the document. It's on page 24. I'm sorry, it's page 18. The numeration is weird, but it calls out exactly the need as part of a poverty reduction strategy to fund meaningful access to legal assistance and representation for children, adults, and families disproportionately affected by poverty and racially biased systems. So, and that it should be a broad right, if you will, or a broad resource that's available, including not just individual representation, but also in policy and program development, and that it's identified as a key component of a successful 10-year plan. Really, so we, initially we were, given the lateness, we weren't sure that we know we didn't really have time to go through the whole plan and so on, but really identified and took the lead also in 2 areas, which is recommendation 5, which is under strategy 5, which is talking about prioritizing urgent needs, and drafted another recommendation 5I, which is to require state entities to collaborate with civil legal aid providers and community-led programs to increase supports, and that in providing urgent services, using civil legal aid as a component of the resources made available. And then similarly, in strategy 7, which is the overall topic is decriminalization of poverty, connecting child welfare and justice-related families to legal resources and civil legal assistance to mitigate further consequences, funding legal services, and identifying evolving civil legal needs of these families. And all of these are directly out of the plan, and these were not there, 10 days before the plan was due to the governor's office. But for Rudy's leadership in this area, she was not only able to get us in the dialogue, but also was responsible for most of these 5I and 7B. I think, so I put the link up so you all have it handy. I'm going to stop sharing this at this point. Stop share. And I just add that Lori, offered or expressed some willingness to continue engaging in the conversation with the legal aid community. And I think we have to sort of figure out a couple of things related to this. And one is it's not entirely clear to us, and really Chach and I were emailing this week about next steps and thinking about what happens next. It's not entirely clear to me whether the need for continued amendments or for different sections is really, she's envisioning part of the process on this going forward or not. She did say it was going to be an organic living document and so on, but I'm not sure what the mechanics of that are exactly, since it's been published and transmitted to the governor. If we were to continue along that vein, I think we would want to develop a process for more providers to to do exactly what was done here, which is to identify key places where legal aid services can be incorporated into the overall strategies. So that's a body of work, if you will. The other question or option is that the governor is supposedly, presumably, moving on this and convening some kind of implementation process or system going forward. And so the question or the opportunity for civil legal aid, given that we're now in the plan, certainly at the initial, as an overall resource or aspect of poverty reduction, how can we participate or get engaged in that implementation process? This is obviously spans multi-agencies and departments and programs and creates new ones and so on. So it's a really big ticket item. So we have not, and I have not begun to sort out how it is that this is moving forward at the governor's office level or the cabinet level. Jim Bamberger did point out that there is an interesting precedent and a very good one that has been used in the past and successfully at the federal level. The White House under the Obama administration launched a what's it called, the White House Legal Aid Task Force, Interagency Task Force, which sort of began the process of convening cabinet members to incorporate and think about the need of legal assistance in order to effectuate, successfully implement programs and so on. And then that task force sort of led to the creation of an Office of Access to Justice in the Justice Department, which was pretty active for a number of years. That sort of got shut down with the most recent past administration, but already there is a push to both, to reinstate that office within the Justice Department under the Biden administration. The whole question now is promoting or perhaps inserting ourselves into whatever cross-cabinet implementation effort is anticipated for this plan is something that also needs to be taking place, regardless of whether there's any more edits to the plan and so on. And so Jim was trying to flag for us that the governor's received this and presumably is moving with it, so we better try to figure out how to inject ourselves in that process. That's all I have. And I don't know if, Chach, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to add a couple things. So as you read the plan, Lori mentioned that strategies 1 and 2 are kind of the overarching strategies. And so that was really key that we were able to get in strategy number 2. And she actually, when she heard what we were talking about, she suggested putting it in number 2. So that was very exciting. The other thing, and I believe Reedy touched on this, that this was really a community-driven plan. And they have a lot of community members. And it was really, and I think is important for us not to take our usual lawyer selves and insert ourselves and try to fix things our way. It's important to really listen to the community and think about how they want things to come about. And then the other things that Lori mentioned is that there are a couple groups that are providing briefs to kind of expand on what they mean about, such as we might be able to do on civil legal aid. What does that mean? How would it be delivered? What exactly should the governor be considering? That is one option too. And I believe those briefs are happening this year. And then in working forward, we need to just be strategic on how we get into the implementation phase. And we don't want to look like we are overtaking anything. So that's something to keep in mind. At the same time, I feel like this is a very important plan to be a part of, and we need to stay on top of it, or we will be in the same, if not worse position than we were at the end of the year and not being any part of the plan.
Thank you, Judge. Any question for them? By the way, this team got this done, and thanks to Disco because this issue first came up in Disco, and thanks to Disco for getting on top of this. This was done. The three of them have to. They got this done during the holiday period with less than a week to go before everything got done. So we owe you guys a debt of gratitude. Thank you. Any comment? And thanks, Murph, for getting on top of this too. Murph helped us with some leadership on this issue. Thank you. Any other comments? All right. We will go to liaison. Oh, sorry, SP, go ahead.
Just really quick. It sounds like this could be a model that that the legal community can look at in terms of what does it look like when communities are leading the pack? And all the points that you made, Chach, I hear you loud and clear. And I think that we should look at this and it's a model. And there's a learning curve, I think, for the legal community in terms of engaging and letting communities lead around issues most impacting them. So we could learn a lot here.
Thank you. We're going to go to liaison reports. Miri, I need to go, so I'm going to have her quickly provide a report before she runs into another meeting.
Well, I know that Michael is and Will are on, so they can probably add to it. But I think one of the exciting things for me as part of the work that I do outside of the board is, the idea of getting the volunteer lawyer program and getting people just starting to think big time about these evictions that are coming for sure in 2021 and addressing that and just preparing for that in a big way. And I know that one of the things that the Pro Bono Council is doing is engaging in ongoing monthly roundtable conversations where the VLPs can, have a candid and productive conversation on the topics of race and equity and grant readiness and all those things. And all of these capacity building, so to speak, to address what, what we keep talking about in our plan, all these things need to be laid out as priorities. But in like I said, in the work that I do every day and part of our conversation at the ATJ board meeting an hour ago, just how are we going to engage with community so that we can really get, people to know beyond the legal community about their resources and how we can partner with the non-legal community so we can walk this, what's coming, this tsunami that is coming, walk in together and use, make the best use of our resources together I'm going to turn it over to Michael because I see your camera's on, so maybe you want to speak to your work.
I don't know if I have anything specific to add. I'm glad Maria mentioned our kind of roundtable discussions, because I don't know if we've told people outside of Pro Bono Council about it, but we're basically just having it's about an hour every month, and it's kind of on rotating topics, and it's been really good to kind of have just a place where maybe not all the VLPs attend, but it's always a good group of people, and we can talk about all different things. Sometimes we need to talk about, you know, ongoing race equity work. Sometimes we need to just focus on housing things, because we know we're going to have a lot of housing work coming through. So that's been really useful, and we started doing that just this summer, and we're going to have an upcoming conversation just on, you know, certain features of you know, QuickBooks and how to use that the best to track your grants and manage things that way. So I guess I would highlight that for the group, that's a nice kind of initiative we have going on. And then of course, housing is kind of the name of the game for us right now.
Thank you, Miria and Michael. We appreciate it. Sir, gender justice.
Your voice T-Rex on us again. Francis, just let you know. Unfortunately, so the Gender and Justice Commission is meeting right at this very minute. I'm hoping that as soon as we get done here, I'm going to jump onto their meeting. So unfortunately, we had a conflict and I have nothing to report from them. Because they're meeting now. And Francis isn't here.
I think I admitted him.
Yeah, there he is.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. Gender and justice, did you already?
Yeah, I gave it because I don't have to repeat it. They're meeting right now, Francis. So as soon as we're done here, I'm going to try to jump on that meeting.
Perfect. Michelle, liaison report.
I am the liaison to the Practice of Law Board and to the Pro Bono and Public Service Committee. I have not been able to get to the meetings. I don't want to put him on the spot too much, but I see that Nick Larson from the Pro Bono and Public Service Committee is on the call in case he wants to give any updates from their group. But his camera's not on right now, so maybe he's opting out, which is reasonable. Sorry.
That's okay. I believe Terry does not have any reports. So Judge Keenan?
No reports.
Okay. The Board of Governors, ATJ Board liaison to the Board of Governors. I believe that's Judge Bradley. I don't see her. Okay. Interpreters Commission, I'm the liaison to Interpreters Commission. Two issues that came up is the issue of interpreters being able to have access to county jails. And that has been a struggle. And also the commission wrote a letter to the Supreme Court asking that interpreters be included among essential workers in the phase where the court staff are going to be getting the vaccination. So the vaccines. So that is one of the things, and it was approved and the governor accepted it. Interpreters are very crucial to access to justice and to the work that we do. Hopefully they will get the vaccines as soon as court staff are getting it too. All right. Did I miss out on any liaison report that?
I have a
SP. I'm sorry.
A brief one. It's okay. It's okay. I have a brief report from the Minority and Justice Commission met last week. And I'll just kind of highlight a couple of things. There was an update on the Racial Justice Initiative taking place, and also the research projects that the commission is focused on, which is pretrial justice decisions, bail, release versus remand, and looking at racial disproportionalities in that area, and plea bargains. And there was discussion around how data is collected and not collected, And given that we have 39 different courts doing different things, collecting data in different ways, we're talking about a very big challenge, and we all know what that's about. And let's see, they did sign on to the immigration bill. They made that decision. They were going to do that. And going back to the question or the issue of the 39 different courts, there's a recognition of how things can be done better. Of course, Snohomish County came up as the example of what a great way that they're doing it. Why isn't everybody doing that? And discussion on why, what are some of the barriers and for that to happen. Governor Alex Stevens, who chairs the work group for equity and disparity, also spoke to around the access to technology and involving the state Supreme Court, having them get more involved in this, and to look at amending the state constitution to put the clerks under the Supreme Court. So there was discussion around that. And there was also discussion around Equal Justice Lobby Day, and just announcements. And so that's kind of a quick go through from my notes.
Thank you, SP.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to go to legislative updates. We have today, thanks to Merv, we have Antonio Ginata here to help us provide some legislative updates. There are some materials included in the agenda that Antonio would help us go over. Antonio, over to you.
Thank you, Francis. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Antonio Ginata. I'm the Policy Director at Columbia Legal Services. I've been asked to talk a little bit, 10 minutes or so, on the legislative updates. We're finishing up week 2 of this virtual session. And, I'm surprised with how well they're pulling it off, to tell you the truth. There have been hearings that have involved, over 100 people wanting to testify. And they've been able to pull it off. You use the Zoom and get folks up there, testify and out, and it works. It's actually great to see the number of folks who are testifying from places like Spokane and the Tri-Cities, where access typically in Olympia is more difficult. So there is these odd benefits of running a virtual session, which I think are important to flag. I wanted to build on Miria's and Michael's mentions on the upcoming sort of challenges around evictions, because there are a number of bills that are being debated that really are tied into the impact of the pandemic, no question, and bills of interest to our community. How do you off-ramp from these moratoria, the foreclosure and eviction moratoria? And there was an interesting consequence of the foreclosure moratoria. So the Foreclosure Fairness Act passed 10 years ago. It created a foreclosure mediation program, and the way it funded it is by requiring financial institutions that were the beneficiary of deeds of trust in more than 250 trustee sales. They were the ones who funded it. If you didn't participate in that many foreclosures, then you didn't have to fund it. Well, guess what? There haven't been any foreclosures. Now all the money for funding this mediation program has gone away. So you have to address that issue, or otherwise you don't have foreclosure mediation. Representative Orwell has run a bill, House Bill 1108, that just got out this morning of executive session, unanimously, thank goodness, that changed the sort of the criteria for funding, so it doesn't apply, so isn't set by the number of foreclosures you were involved in, the financial institution was involved with this year. It's last year. So finding these innovative ways to address things that you wouldn't have expected, with suddenly having these these months-long moratoria on foreclosures. The other thing is obviously the tenant issue, as the tsunami of evictions that we're concerned about once the emergency period runs out. So Senator Kuderer has a tenant protection bill that she heard yesterday, Senate Bill 5160. For folks who haven't heard about it, what it would do is it would prohibit landlords from terminating an expiring lease for at least 2 years after the expiration of the public health emergency. And it requires landlords to create payment plans for folks who have back rent that was accumulated during the emergency. And it also creates a right to counsel, which is an interesting component of this. So courts would have to appoint attorneys for indigent tenants at any show cause hearing. And indigence is defined in the bill as whether you're receiving public assistance or whether your income is 200% or less of the federal poverty level. There is a fiscal note on that bill. It's $25 million that came from OCLA in terms of what would be necessary to provide that coverage. As you all, I expect, know, it's a difficult time for the legislature to be considering bills with big fiscal notes. But there was an expectation that the fiscal note was going to be higher. So we expect Senator Cooter to get that bill out of committee. As to whether it has enough legs and momentum to make it all the way through without major amendments. There was a lot of opposition at the hearing from small landlords. And so there's going to need to be some, I expect, winnowing down of that bill, but that's out there and important. At CLS, we're running a smaller bill related more specifically to damage claims that come out of landlord-tenant relationships. It requires better documentation of damage claims that are made by a landlord, made clear what regular use, wear and tear means. Requires, estimates of the receipts of work done to justify damage claims, because those damage claims can follow a tenant as they move from unit to unit and can prevent people from getting housed. This is a bill we ran last year, didn't make it through, but Representative Tai is really interested in running again. So I just wanted to flag that in the world of housing bills that are coming up that may be of interest to us. On our legislative priorities, we're also working on trying to enact automatic self-executing bank account garnishment protections. So right now in Washington, $2,000 of your bank account is protected from a garnishment if you fill out an exemption form. And we realize, and practitioners know, that very few people actually fill out the exemption form, even though they could actually protect that money. That money gets frozen for several weeks, and folks are unable to make payments for rent, housing, food, et cetera. And so there have been a couple of states, 3 states, that have actually made their bank account garnishment protections self-executing. California, New York, and now Massachusetts. And so we're trying to work with Representative Wallen to create a bill that would, at least temporarily during this COVID emergency, make the bank account garnishments self-executing.
I'm good.
Protection self-executing. All right. Let me just talk about a couple of other bills. Many of us are aware of House Bill 1072, which removes the immigrant restriction on the use of OCLA funds. That bill, thanks to everybody on this call who put in written testimony and support, it was all very helpful. The bill passed out of executive committee. It will be heard by appropriations next Friday. So we'll be signing in pro on that bill. Won't be testifying. Just want to make sure that folks realize it doesn't have a fiscal impact, but it still needs to get looked at by appropriations. So just want to make sure that it doesn't get hung up on a cutoff. So we'll be pushing for that bill to move forward. One of the interesting issues that we've been working on for years and years now is trying to end the practice of debt-based driver's license suspensions. So no more taking away someone's driver's license, which they need to get to work, just because they can't pay a traffic infraction. We're particularly worried about driver's licenses and access to be able to get back to work as we get out of this emergency, and are worried that folks with a lot of debts may not be able to pay those debts to be able to get their driver's license back. So there's a big push there, but it's interesting. The sad reality is that if we pass this bill, the state and local governments will get less money, because money that comes from reinstatements there's fewer suspensions, which means fewer reinstatement fees. And so there become the fee issue gets locked into this issue around driver's license suspensions. And so we're already hearing concerns from the way the bill is funded and how it takes away, potentially harms municipalities because they receive less money from the way the bill is structured. So this interplay between fees and making sure that local governments are properly funded and actually not having this unfair policy of taking away people's driver's licenses because they can't pay a ticket. We have to work through that interplay and make sure that the bill is properly funded in a way that doesn't hurt local governments. So that has come up. That is Senate Bill 5226, Senator Solomon's bill. It's still not scheduled for a hearing. We expect it will be heard next week. I want to just raise two other things and then I'm done because I don't want to give the full long list, but there are big ticket items that people have been really focused on, particularly as a response, in seeing what's been unearthed by this COVID pandemic emergency. One is obviously that our unemployment system is broken in many ways and clearly doesn't cover folks who should qualify for unemployment. And that includes people who have been working here who don't have legal authorization, immigration status to qualify for unemployment. So there was going to be a proposal to create a sort of mirror program to the federally funded unemployment system that would potentially allow for folks who are undocumented to qualify for unemployment insurance. But that's been really winnowed down again because of concerns about a big fiscal note. So that strategy has changed to provide more funding for the WRF, for the Immigrant Relief Fund, but no new program that creates a mirror unemployment program. And then there was a health equity for all bill. It actually did get introduced, 1191, which creates parity, healthcare parity for folks who are undocumented. But that also has been shut down by legislators due to the high fiscal note. It won't even get a hearing. So the advocates around issues about healthcare equity and parity are trying to figure out ways to incrementally address this issue without being burdened by a high fiscal note when the state is facing such a large budget deficit. So very active last couple of weeks. Lots going on, and happy to answer any questions about any of these bills or any of the bills on our legislative priority sheet. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, Antonio, I think I asked a version of this question last time, and it may have been a little premature, but given the passage, the midnight hour of the extended CARES Act legislation, what does that do to the state deficit in terms of the projections on the deficit? Were they just independent of anticipated costs, or is there any relief found there?
There is definitely relief, Cesar. Thank you for asking. Yes, I mean the idea walking before that plan, the expectation was around $4 and $4.5 billion in the hole. I don't have the exact numbers as to how much the federal funding has helped, but it's definitely helping to backfill a lot of programs that were at risk. So the way I would describe it is typically nowadays, if I was even in this virtual session, we would start hearing the rumors of everybody get ready to deal with some heavy cuts, start tightening your belt, you'd start getting the messaging from the governor, setting up the stage for cuts. I am not hearing that right now. And I think that there is a real commitment by this legislature to not go into a cuts posture and explore funding. The hearings that are happening in finance are about new ways to bring in funding. So the lift obviously becomes heavier when the hole is bigger. But right now, I think I'm feeling confidence is a tough word. Optimistic that we're not looking at cuts in the way that we could have been. Any other questions?
All right, thank you, Antonio. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. All right, we go next to Equal Justice Coalition update. Will you talk about Kara Master's nomination? Well,
yeah. So a couple updates from the EJC. First off, yeah, thanks so much, Antonio, for the policy updates. As everybody knows, the EJC focuses on the funding side. And this year that means not just defending against cuts in this tough but potentially looking somewhat optimistic budget environment, but supporting the $11 million investment to continue the COVID response services funded by emergency dollars this year. And so that's reflected in the governor's budget. And there were a couple of hearings in the House and Senate on the governor's budget last week, where we submitted some testimony and had some folks sign in and support, which is nice. And actually, they have made it very easy to do online this year. The more important hearings on the budget will be coming up in those committees in February. But as you all should know, and thanks to Bonnie for putting the link in the materials, we're having our virtual lobby days in support of the legal aid investment starting in a couple weeks. We've already had a couple meetings with stakeholders and select legislators, but we are getting a lot of people signed up to talk to their legislators for meetings that start the week of February 8th. And I will drop the link again into the chat for those of you who want to sign up for virtual lobby days. They're pretty basic, usually 15-20-minute meetings with legislators. We've had some good success so far and have a lot of people signing up, which is exciting. We're also going to have a virtual kickoff for lobby days right after the Goldmark luncheon on Friday, February 5th. We'll get into a little bit more detail about our ask and our messaging, and sounds like we'll hear from a few legislators as well. So I just want to encourage everybody to sign up. And then we'll also have some ways, if you're not able to participate in virtual meetings, to just quickly send messages to your legislators in support of the budget. And then also we'll be asking folks to do the online sign in and support during the budget hearings later this month, and maybe asking a couple folks to submit written or even virtual testimony as well. I think that's mostly it for our lobby activities. I know Jim will talk about the state funding picture a little bit more in a minute. What Francis just mentioned is that we typically select a chair-elect to get ready to take over the EJC in the last year of the chair's term. Our chair, Kirsten Barron, her term ends this year. And so we're excited that Kara Masters has agreed to become the chair-elect. You might know her from ATJ Board. She's an attorney on Bainbridge Island, and a volunteer with many legal aid organizations, and I'm guessing many of you know her. Kirsten wasn't able to be here today, and she really wants to present Kara's nomination in person. So we've asked to do that at next month's ATJ Board meeting for you all to consider. And we'll be sending a bio and more information about Kara for you then. But just wanted to quickly flag that we're really excited about bringing Kara on board as the chair-elect during the session, and then take over at the end of the year. I think that's about it, unless anybody has any questions. I also just wanted to quickly thank Francis again for his op-ed that he wrote with Justice Stevens. You might have seen in the Spokane Spokesman Review earlier this week that gets into detail about the importance of funding legal aid, and specifically about the eviction resolution program. So thanks again, Francis. That's a great help to us during our outreach for sure.
Thank you, Will. We go to funding report. Cesar Fedra.
Thanks, Francis. I have a very interesting report this time around. For years, we have complained about stagnant federal funding, not keeping up with increasing costs and so on. And on several occasions, there have been efforts to try to increase federal funding to catch up with where our funding levels would have been had federal funding kept up with both increasing costs and the rise and increase in poverty populations. The Legal Services Corporation has determined to seek $1.3 billion in this coming federal budget process for the 22 federal appropriation. That's basically a 200% increase from current funding levels. As you might recall, last time I reported that there had been a big increase to $460 million. And so Lord knows what the chances of that are, but certainly this is a huge opportunity given not only the severity of the crises, but the commitment on the part of the Biden administration to do what it takes to really help people and make sure that the country can minimize the harm and move forward. Attended to that, and by the way, the National Legal Aid Defender Association, which is the Legal Aid and Defender Association, has not only endorsed that budget request, but they are also they've also set out a number of recommendations to the Biden administration, and one of them is to remove the appropriation restriction on non-federal funds, what we call the entity restriction. So if that piece goes through, it would be a huge boost in terms of providing increased access to not only undocumented persons, but potentially to class action lawsuits and other activities like that. There's a very ambitious agenda on the part of both LSC and NLADA. Historically, there's been a lot of concern about maintaining the bipartisan aspect and support for funding. I think this is the first time in a while that there seems to be an interest in really moving on that particular restriction. And again, it would not in any way limit the restrictions of the federal government on federal funds, just on non-federal funds, which is the entity restriction or the poison pill, as some people refer to it. So that's all I got.
Question for Cesar? Comments? Thank you. We go to state report. Jim, welcome.
Yes, thank you. The budget that we submitted appeared in the governor's budget, fully funded as it's required to. By way of reminder, it's an $11 million biennial request exclusively focused on carrying forward emergency COVID-19 legal assistance programs. The budget also contemplates continuing review and augmentation as the substance and intensity of legal needs from successive waves of legal problems flow through the system. As Antonio spoke, the legislature, Senate Bill 5160, contemplates creating a right to appointed counsel in eviction show cause and trial cases. We did submit a fiscal note. Antonio put it at 25 million. That's a biennial number. That includes a $6 million one-time investment for the first wave of evictions that will come out once the moratorium is lifted. We are working extremely closely with Senator Cooter, with staff, with members of the House Housing and Senate Housing and Local Government Committee, and stakeholders, including the dispute resolution centers, Superior Court Judges Association, AOC, et cetera, to ensure that the program, if it is included in a final bill, is ramped in sufficiently, funded sufficiently, and that services are made available. It would be an extraordinarily heavy lift for us, but it's one that if the legislature says do it, we'll do it. In addition to that, there is a House Bill 1219, that would create a universal right to counsel for children in child welfare dependency cases that would be phased in over a 6-year period. We just submitted the fiscal note on that one which contemplates by the time it's fully funded, it's about $32 million a year in additional expenditures. The first years of implementation are, about $7 million for the biennium. It is going to be heard in the House Early Learning Committee. There is not universal agreement, even amongst those who provide these services, that the bill is appropriate. We fully anticipate the King County Department of Public Defense to testify against the bill, in large measure because at least one person in leadership at KCDPD does not philosophically agree that children should have legal representation, even though the Federal Children's Bureau and national experts say otherwise. Everything is in flux. We are working with the Department of Commerce on implementation of their rent assistance program, which includes up to 10% expenditure on what the Federal Relief Act calls housing stability services. Housing stability services can and should include civil legal aid representation, and so that may be a source of funding for the right to counsel bill on a statewide basis. We are hoping also to persuade Commerce and local administrators of these funds that the pilot eviction resolution program developed by the Superior Court Judges Association, now operating in 6 counties, is in itself a housing stability program insofar as it diverts cases away from the eviction process and facilitates resolution of unpaid rent disputes. So we're going to be working with that. As I say, we're working with Commerce. We are also working with the governor's office, and I'm working with the governor's office, the DC office, and colleagues nationally to address some very disturbing interpretations of the federal bill coming out of the Department of Treasury, both as it relates to the allocation of administrative expense authority, as well as to the documentation required to establish eligibility for rent assistance for those who are the intended beneficiaries of the same. So there's like 2,000 things going on at the same time relating to funding across multiple platforms, and we'll know more as we go forward.
Thank you, Jim. Any question or comment for Jim? Right, we go next to Caitlin for LFW and campaign.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Francis. We have a lot to report. It's a busy time at the Legal Foundation of Washington. Following up on what Antonio said, I want to just mention the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund that the Legal Foundation has administered over the last several months. As you'll recall, the governor's office allocated $38 million in the initial round of funding to go out in the form of payments to individuals who were impacted by COVID but not eligible for the federal stimulus package. We received 94,000 applications, and we were able to fund 38,000 of those initial individuals and families who needed this assistance. At the 11th hour on Christmas Eve, the governor gave us another $22 million. So we were able to fund a significant additional batch of those applications that had gone unfunded just because we didn't have enough money. And now we're in conversation with DSHS and the governor's office about potentially even more funding. And we also want to be part of their strategic plan about what's a good permanent home for the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund, where to place it, and the level of funding. We're developing our final report, which is due at the end of this month and which we'll share in the near future with the Alliance and the ATJ Board. So It's been really an honor to be part of this sort of this fledgling effort, which we hope becomes a permanent source of support for people who are eligible. Other news on the legal foundation front, you know, IOLTA is always a worry, but we've got a stability plan and we continue to look at other resources that could be available for civil legal aid. In terms of the Campaign for Equal Justice, just as a reminder, the annual Goldmark Award luncheon is on Friday, February 5th, 2 weeks from today. If you want to come, please do. It's totally free. Just go to legalfoundation.org and do click on the Goldmark tab and you can just sign up right there. It's easy as pie. You know, we've never done a virtual event before, but I think it's going to be pretty good. What's the football guy's name who's speaking, Will?
Baldwin, Seahawks hero Doug Baldwin.
Football
okay.
guy,
Yeah,
come on, Caitlin.
Anyway, he's a great advocate for equal justice. He's so much more than just a sports person. And he's going to be our keynote speaker. And we're looking forward to presenting the Charles A. Goldmark Distinguished Service Award to longtime civil rights lawyer Lem Howell. And I hope you'll join us. You know, again, it's gonna be like this, you know, Zoom thing, but it should be great. Will, am I missing anything else about the Campaign for Equal Justice?
The thing I was going to mention was that there's some friendly competition going on amongst fundraisers for the Goldmark. I think some of you are involved in that, and I'm going to drop the link.
Yes. I want to say that Sally is ahead of me, and that is not acceptable. So if you're registering for Goldmark, please donate on my virtual table and not on SARS table. SARS should not be leading this race.
Donate to me. No, don't listen to Francis. Go to my page. I need some more donors.
Or you could go to Jim's page or my page, or anyway. It's all in good fun, and it's all for our great cause and our common work that, you know, whose mission we all share. So thanks for your support. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me, but that's what I have for you today.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Kathleen? All right. Any updates or announcements from the community? By anyone? All right. Thank you, everyone. Do not forget, please register for Goldmark on time. And when you are registering, you can actually make a donation at that time. And let your donation be to the virtual Francis Adewale virtual table, not Sal, okay? Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. This is why I have the gavel.